This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, NIL Game Changers, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And this half hour brought to you by NIL Game Changers. The ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness. Business, individual, athlete. They have great people there that will help you out. You can start your journey at nilgamechangers.org. And we're in the Sunbury Motors studio. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia. Routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online it's sunburymotors.com. Always great to spend any time with Neal Coolong. My friend, thanks for being here.
You bet. As always, it's great to be here.
All right, so draft coming up for the month is out. Everybody's going through their final draft phase. What have you taken a look at with the draft to this point? Where, like, a few things you really feel comfortable about because you've done a lot of research on it?
Probably that I don't know what I'm talking about overall. That's the answer every year. I would say, generally speaking, you like some of the talent level at the quarterback position. I don't think, though, this is a year we're going to say, 3 Hall of Fame players came from the first 4 picks. I think right now we fall into the issue of the top-ranked quarterbacks being who they are for obvious reasons. But I think the hype is kind of becoming more probably than who they are as a group. The first one I would look at is Drake Maye, for example. I don't think Drake Maye is the can't-miss guy that people think that he is. He might not even be the 3rd best quarterback of that class. A lot of people that know far more than I'll ever know talk about him in the 20s, if you look at it purely on value. And you see it when you watch his tape. There are high-level things that you look at, but the functionality, the throw-to-throw, the process management piece of the game, he's really not all that great. And that isn't to say that he needs to be, step on the field day one, be the starter, and rule the league. I'm just saying, talking about him as the 2nd overall pick, he's really more of a potential guy. There are a lot of great tools there. There is good film of him, but there are flaws to his game, and they're the types of flaws that will take a little bit to fix. I don't think he's going to be a great rookie if he has to start. We're seeing that more and more, and a lot more people are kind of coming to the same conclusion. It's like, well, you love the upside, you love the arm, the competitiveness, the physicality of him, but there are a lot of mechanical flaws within his game right now that are going to take a bit to kind of work out and get used to. With that, if you're going to take the high-end prospect, you almost kind of look at Jayden Daniels as a better risk, a better long-term investment, just because of the high-level athleticism, the high-level arm talent that he has. Certain schemes, I think, probably could fit him a little bit better than what they could Maye in a lot of cases. Obviously, Caleb Williams is who he is. A lot of great things that you're going to get from him. I wouldn't say that he's a can't-miss guy either. There are challenges he's going to have right away. And J.J. McCarthy, he was a fast riser there for a little bit. It's not that he won't be now, but there's a reason why we've never had 4 quarterbacks taken the first 4 picks. Every year we'll talk ourselves into a team that's going to trade up to get this player, but when it comes down to it, it doesn't happen for a reason. I'm not sure the value is completely there for him for that spot either. I could see the 4 of them going by pick 12, but I don't think we're going to see 4 in the top 5 the way that we probably thought was going to happen about a month ago. And not to say that it's a bad class, but we're really starting to kind of even it all out 1 through 4. And then with a guy like Penix probably coming in 5th overall, Bo Nix, I think he's probably a 2nd-round pick. 4 or 5 will go in the first round. I don't think Penix is going to go before the 20s if he does go in that spot at all. Not a bad class overall, but just not one I think that's reaching the hype that we had of it in December, January, February.
But the bottom line is that when it comes to the draft, it's a lot like recruiting. You don't know who's going to be able to make the transition, right, from one level to the next and how easily they're able to do it. I always use the example here of Penn State had 3 wide receivers in the mid-2000s. Jordan Norwood came in as a gray shirt, so he had to start 6 months later than everybody else. Deion Butler was a walk-on who came in as a corner. And Derek Williams was the 5-star of all 5 stars and was the number 1 recruit in the country. Well, in the end, Derek Williams ended up playing for the Detroit Lions. Deion Butler ended up playing for the Chargers and the Seahawks, and Norwood, until Kadarius Toney broke his record, had the longest punt return in Super Bowl history and played 10 years in the league. And it's the same with the draft. Neal, anybody who sits there and claims to be an expert, all you're doing is educated guessing as opposed to just guessing.
And that is the expertise. It's funny you bring that up, though, because I saw a tidbit a little while ago about what Jim Harbaugh did in Los Angeles. They kind of redid the locker room on the Chargers side of things, in that he set everybody in numerical order, first off, of where their lockers are. But second, he put their high school star rating next to all their names.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because the first thought that I had was, why not college? Why not the draft spot? You go back that far, that's probably the point in which you're going to see the most variation. And it really shows you. I've been a big believer in this. I know how simple this sounds, but the best indicator of draft height overall is your high school star rating.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, though, all that really means is they still believe that you have a ton of potential. It's probably you're only 4 years removed from that ranking. So you come into the league with that. Where do you end up? The second half of that is really to say, how good are you going to be over a string of 4, 5, 6 years in the NFL at the pro level when you're making a bunch of money, when you're on your own for your nutrition and everything like that, outside of the facility, of course. All of these adult things that you have to do. When you have to become a professional athlete, which means round-the-clock care, investment in yourself, probably a much heightened level of maturity, not everyone makes that transition very well. In fact, right. I'd say most of them don't. There's a lot of money at stake, though, that coincides directly with that transition. So from there, you get into what's a failure, what's a success. I mean, it's so hard to say without the context of the situation, what may have happened, injuries. But a large part of that, I think, is that level of professional maturity that just may or may not be there for a player. May not be a big deal to them. They may not love football that much, but they're fantastic athletes. They have a lot of upside. They can coach them up. They'll be motivated by money. They're going to go after that extension. Yes and no. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I think that's what a lot of people kind of look at. Success is the best of the best of the best that get those high dollar 50-year extensions. That's not something that happens as often, I think, as we're considering knowing how many players there are in the league. The draft piece of it is trying to figure out how to best tie all of that together, and then to some degree probably just ignore it because there's not much you can do. I mean, when they get in the door, that's when that work begins. But you're not going to know. They're all going to tell you what you want to hear going into the process. But, we talk about this often around draft time. How they structure the draft is not the linear board that you look at with, thousands upon thousands of quote-unquote draft analysts in social media, they line everybody up 1 through 275 and talk about he's my wide receiver 1 and all these things that don't really, have substance to them. Right. The reality is teams know the static here is the draft. The static is the rounds that they're drafting in, not the position, not the players, not even the coaches. It's the draft itself. That's what's static. So the general manager is setting up a philosophy that basically defines what a player at each of these positions looks like in each of these rounds. The scouts are going out and evaluating players based on those measurements. And it could be different for everybody. They might want, cornerbacks. We're only drafting a quarterback in the first round if he's 6'1" or taller. It's stuff like that. With that, the skill really comes in not just matching them up, but from there, you have the outline of the guy. Is this a position of need? Is this something we're going to need in a couple of years? You have to guess on whether or not a guy is going to stay healthy, whether or not he's going to sign the extension you're going to offer him. This may be a bigger need than you think in 2 years, as well as the development of a 21, 22-year-old athlete who may not have any money at all. I understand NIL is giving them something, but it's probably not going to be very high for a lot of people, especially beyond like the first 15, 20 picks of the draft. So weighing all of that in, acting as if it's anything but, to be fair, a very educated guess that you're doing really well if you hit 3 out of 7 in a draft. It's just nonsense to act as if they can do better than that. It's hard to do it, and it's not like it's static anyway. You can't say I drafted this guy in 2024. By 2027, he's now a bust. What happened between when he drafted and the point that he became a bust? That is not known when the guy was drafted. Could be 1,000 different things. You never know what could happen. So it's a projection that they can do just really based on physical things above anything else, and just a feel and an experience-based opinion off of the feeling that you get when you talk to the kid. There's really not a whole lot more they can do than that.
We know that they'll take the time to see how high you jump, how well you do the shuttle, and so forth. 40-yard dash, 225 pounds. When you've talked to anybody associated with teams, do they talk to you at all about where fundamentals come into play with players versus the numbers that they're getting to make a draft pick?
Yes, and that's such an interesting question, because there are 4 words that you get most often when you ask that. We'll coach him up.
No.
That's usually the response to his fundamentals are terrible. This cornerback can't tackle to save his life. This guy can run and he can't catch. We'll coach him up is usually what comes out of that. I won't say names, but there was a rookie receiver who came in the league within the last 10, 12 years. First-round draft pick, not a huge prospect, but physically very, very gifted. He came into the league, and there was a reporter that told me they were at rookie minicamp, and they sat for 15 minutes and explained to this kid where to set his feet before the snap.
Right.
He didn't even know that.
Right.
And at one point, the reporter asked him, and he even said, coaches didn't really say a whole lot about that. Something like that was the receiver's answer. Like, he didn't even think it was a big deal. The level of fundamentals, this goes back to Bill Parcells. I quote this often. The NFL is what the college game gives us. If they're not getting the fundamentals in college, they're not going to get a whole lot more in the NFL. It's on them at that point to do it. Where I would argue this, though, is among the quarterback position. And we've talked a bunch over the year, or over the last year at least, of what we saw with Brock Purdy, a tremendous improvement of him as a passer when he was at Iowa State versus where he was his rookie year with San Francisco. I'm not saying that he is the greatest thing that ever lived, but if his tape in college looked like it did his rookie year, he's getting drafted a lot higher than the 7th round, and everybody would collectively agree with that. He took it on his own to work on those fundamentals. And certainly that's an option that's open to players, but by and large, they're not told that they need to do that. They have to get out on the field, play the game, and from there, they can sink or swim with that. Some might argue that the ones with the access to people to kind of set them up for that are going to be better off. A position that's so technically nuanced like quarterback, there's more opportunity to do that. A lot of it is football. It's a natural athletic game. You need live reps. It's hard to learn how to tackle if you can't go out and tackle people. So they can try to recreate it as best they can, but unless they find, anybody willing to be tackled over and over again by an NFL linebacker, it's hard to practice that skill in real time against real moving bodies. So outside of practice, outside of the team facility. So they do need to emphasize that probably a bit more. But at the end of the day, there's far less time to work with the players than people think they do, and they're not going over fundamentals even with the rookies. It's on them to learn that. Some accept that challenge and get better. Some have success leaning on their athleticism overall, and some fizzle out because they're just, in the end, not very good players. This name always comes up to me. I think it's funny that nobody ever brings up Luke Joeckel as one of the greatest busts of all time. Mm-hmm. Luke Joeckel was he was a prototype offensive tackle out of Texas A&M.
Yep.
There was no doubt he was at worst the 2nd overall pick in this draft. Mm-hmm. He was the cliche, and this cliche bugs me probably more than any other. You draft him, he's your starting left tackle for the next 12 years, as if offensive linemen can't get hurt. That never happened.
I know.
It's Joeckel got on a field, and Steve, I'm telling you, there are few players you will watch drafted that high that looked as bad as he did immediately. Mm-hmm. He was horrendous. I mean, just like you felt bad for. You give up 8 sacks in 9 games or something like that. Yeah. He got moved to guard his 2nd year, and he was out of the league before the end of his rookie contract. Out of the league. Right. Signed with one other team. I think it was Seattle. Jacksonville drafted him. I think he was with Seattle. I might be wrong about that, but he was gone long after that. And he played less than 50 games in his career, and he got hurt for a little bit of a spell, but nothing significant. He was a tremendously poor football player, mechanically, and you could see it right away. Nobody worked with that guy. The degree that he had the desire and the will to play, I don't know. I've never met him, but he was horribly deficient at the position. And nobody talks about that. They talk about the high-profile burnouts, arrests, speculation about doing this or that or the other thing. Some of these guys just aren't any good and need to get a lot better, and they're nothing but traits. Scouts have to evaluate that kind of stuff, and they missed hugely in that. Steelers outside linebackers coach Aaron Curry, great player. I don't know what happened to him. He didn't do anything when he got to the pros. He was also a pretty poor pro level player. It's hard to scout all of those things together, but you do get a sense of where the fundamentals have to come in, and that's not the stuff we talk about. Coaches will talk about it, and a lot of the stories we just don't know exactly what happened. So much of it is on the prospects to continue to work with private coaches on their own, whatever it is that they need to do to improve their game, because they're not good enough going from college to the NFL. I think people highly overrate the skill of college football players in comparison to the NFL, where they have 6 years on average of pro coaching, pro nutrition, a lot of money to keep themselves conditioned, and all of those game reps. They're just vastly superior to college athletes. I don't think that's much of a stretch to say that. Just because they're great prospects, though, doesn't mean that they're done. They have to work on their craft and become good football players.
Well, and I feel, regardless of sport, hockey, basketball, baseball, football, I see more games lost today because somebody or multiple somebodies have lousy fundamentals. And that's why I asked the question, because I'm seeing losing happen because some people have no idea how to play.
I hate to say this, but, losing, yes, there are missed tackles consistently. I mean, to be fair, it's the ball carrier's job to make a guy miss a tackle.
Oh,
but,
yeah. I got that.
A lot of them fundamentally tackling, they're up too high.
Yeah.
They're looking at their helmet on the ball and they miss. They're too high and they're exposed at that point. But what I think of immediately when I think of that is Ryan Shazier. Yeah. I think enough time has probably passed now that you might be able to say that Ryan Shazier got hurt on hits like that twice in his pro career prior to the one that knocked him out of the game. Mm-hmm. Fundamentally, he was very poor, not a good tackler. Cincinnati will tell you that before he got, the year before he got hurt. Yeah. A questionable hit that he put on somebody. At some point, defender's job is to get the ball carrier on the ground, but it's not always going to be clean. It's not always going to be pretty, but you need to protect yourself as well. And with all due respect to him, who would have been a guy who would have been a tremendous player, he did not want to lower his shoulder into the midsection of a player. He hit up high. Not the biggest guy. He's pretty slight. You're not going to find a whole lot of linebackers that in today's game that are as lanky as he is. I should say inside linebackers, but a tremendous athlete overall, and he would have been a very effective player. But he's running guys down. If he's got to take them straight up, he tended to go a little bit high, try to stand a guy up and let somebody else come in and take him down. That's a dangerous way to play the game. And we saw the results of what can happen. Unfortunately, I mean, we're grateful it doesn't happen more often. Mm-hmm. But even if it's not as disastrous as his injury was, there are a lot of guys that get hurt playing the game in such a way that they're ignoring their own safety. We extend accolades to players that do that. He plays recklessly. No abandon for his own body. It's not quite that simple. I mean, you're doing it the right way. You can protect yourself as much as possible with the understanding that injuries come with this game. It's not a pain-free sport. But Shazier, I don't think the team ever reported this, but around the locker room, I think it was fairly obvious that Shazier probably broke his collarbone early in the 2015 season on a tackle that wasn't all that dissimilar than the one that got him paralyzed. He didn't go about tackling the way he probably should have, and you'd hope that the injuries would have taught him something, if not his coaches. But winning and losing games is one thing, and the other is it's a risk and safety. You got to teach them how to protect themselves. You got to teach them how to do the right things to give them as much safety as humanly possible. Sometimes though it doesn't matter. A guy's got to be out on the field. He's doing what he's doing, and you hope you don't see the worst consequences of that come out on Sundays.
You're the best. It's always great to have you with us. You mean a lot to us. Thanks so much, Neal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Neal Coolong. Final half hour, open lines. This half hour has been brought to you by NIL Game Changers. Go to NIL Game Changers to start your journey today. NILGameChangers.org.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
You want your young athlete to get the most out of life and NIL. You need a roadmap, a strategic approach. NIL Game Changers help student athletes earn while they learn in their collegiate journey. Driven by former student athletes and coaches who work as NIL sports agents and content media designers, they'll guide both student and family, starting with high school students looking toward college and those already in college. Get a seasoned team of marketing experts with a background in athletics and coaching. Visit NILGameChangers.org, the ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness opportunities.